Daniel was exhausted. The kind of tired that seeps into your bones and makes every movement feel like you're walking through water. It was past 11 at night and he'd just finished his second shift of the day. First, the morning warehouse job loading boxes onto trucks. Then the evening shift at the gas station, standing behind bulletproof glass and selling lottery tickets to people who probably needed their money more than the state did. His daughter Mia was with Mrs. Rodriguez again. The neighbor had become his lifeline over the past 3 years since his wife left. $8 an hour, cash, and she never complained when he ran late. Still, guilt gnawed at him every time he thought about Mia falling asleep on someone else's couch instead of her own bed. Daniel rubbed his eyes as he drove his beat-up Honda through the quiet streets. The check engine light had been on for 2 months now. He'd looked up the code online. Oxygen sensor. $300 he didn't have, so he drove it anyway and prayed it wouldn't die before he could scrape together enough for the repair. Tonight he decided to take the shortcut. The route through the old industrial district shaved off about 10 minutes. Most people avoided it after dark. Abandoned warehouses, broken streetlights, and the occasional homeless camp. But Daniel was too tired to care about atmosphere. He just wanted to get Mia and go home. That's when he heard it, a thumping sound. Muffled but rhythmic, bang, bang, bang. Daniel slowed down, his heart rate picking up despite his exhaustion. The sound was coming from somewhere on his left. He squinted through the darkness, his headlights cutting weak paths through the gloom. There. A car. A really nice car, actually. Some kind of luxury sedan with that sleek design that screamed money. It was parked at an odd angle near one of the old loading docks. Like someone had pulled in quickly and didn't care about staying between the lines. The thumping continued. Daniel's first instinct was to keep driving. This was the kind of situation people died in. The kind you watched on true crime shows while shaking your head at the stupid decisions. Don't investigate strange noises in abandoned places. Rule number 1. But he slowed to a stop anyway. What if someone was hurt? What if they needed help? The thumping had a desperate quality to it now that he was listening closely. Someone was definitely in trouble. Daniel pulled over and sat in his car for a moment, hands gripping the steering wheel. His phone was at 23% battery. He pulled it out and held it ready. If anything looked wrong, he'd call 911 immediately and get out of there. He stepped out of his car, leaving the engine running and the driver's door open. An exit strategy. The night air was cool, and somewhere in the distance a dog barked. The thumping had stopped. "Hello?" Daniel called out, his voice sounding smaller than he'd intended.
"Is someone there?"
Nothing. He approached the luxury car slowly. The windows were tinted dark. Too dark to see inside. His heart hammered in his chest. This was stupid. This was so incredibly stupid. Then the thumping started again, more frantic this time. It was definitely coming from the trunk. "Oh God," Daniel whispered. Someone was locked in there. He rushed to the back of the car and tried the trunk release. Locked. Of course it was locked. He pulled out his phone, fingers shaking as he started to dial 911. But what if whoever was inside didn't have much time? What if they were suffocating right now, while he waited for the police to arrive? Daniel looked around frantically and spotted a metal pipe lying near one of the warehouse dumpsters. He grabbed it, then hesitated. Was he really about to break into a car? What if this was all some elaborate setup? What if someone was waiting to rob him or worse? The thumping came again. Weaker this time. That decided it. Daniel swung the pipe at the taillight. The plastic shattered on the second hit. He dropped to his knees and reached through the broken light, fumbling for the trunk release mechanism. His fingers found a cable and he pulled hard. The trunk popped open. A woman practically exploded upward, gasping for air. Her hands were bound with zip ties and there was tape across her mouth. Her eyes were wide with terror. Mascara streaked down her face. She was wearing what had probably been an expensive business suit, now rumpled and torn. It's okay," Daniel said, holding up his hands. "I'm here to help. Hold still." His hands were shaking so badly he could barely work, but he managed to peel the tape from her mouth as gently as he could. She gasped and coughed, sucking in deep breaths of air. "We need to get you out of here," Daniel said, looking around nervously. "Whoever did this might come back." The woman nodded, unable to speak yet. Daniel helped her climb out of the trunk. She nearly collapsed, her legs unable to support her after being cramped in that small space. He caught her and steadied her against the car. "My phone," she finally managed to croak out. "Do you have a phone?" "Yes, I'm calling the police right now." Daniel dialed 911 with trembling fingers. As he spoke to the dispatcher, giving their location and explaining the situation, he studied the woman more carefully. Even in her disheveled state, there was something commanding about her. The kind of presence you couldn't fake. Her suit, despite being ruined, had probably cost more than his monthly rent. Her watch, still on her wrist, looked like it could pay for Mia's college education. "They're sending police and an ambulance," Daniel told her after hanging up. "Should be here in about 5 minutes." The woman nodded, still catching her breath. She looked at Daniel with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You saved my life," she said simply. "I just heard the noise and—" "No." She cut him off. "You saved my life. Most people would have kept driving." Daniel didn't know what to say to that. He probably should have kept driving. The smart move would have been to call the police from a safe distance and let them handle it. "What's your name?" she asked. "Daniel." "Daniel Chen." Something flickered across her face. Surprise, recognition? But it was gone so quickly he thought he might have imagined it. "I'm Victoria," she said. "Victoria Ashford." The name meant nothing to Daniel. Should it have? She said it like he was supposed to recognize it. In the distance, sirens began to wail. Daniel felt relief wash over him. Help was coming. This would all be over soon, and he could go get Mia and try to forget this entire surreal night ever happened. But as he stood there in the darkness, next to a woman he just pulled from a trunk, Daniel had no idea that this moment would change everything. That the simple choice to stop and help would unravel secrets about his own past that had been buried for decades. The sirens grew louder. Victoria was staring at him with that strange intensity again. And Daniel, exhausted father of one, warehouse worker and gas station attendant, just wanted to go home. He had no idea that home would never feel quite the same again. 2 weeks had passed since that night, and Daniel had almost convinced himself it was some kind of fever dream. The police had taken his statement, thanked him for his help, and sent him on his way. Victoria had been whisked off to the hospital surrounded by people in expensive suits and serious expressions. He'd watched her disappear into an ambulance, and that was the last he'd seen of her. Life had returned to normal. Wake up at 5. Get Mia ready for school. Work the warehouse shift. Pick up Mia. Help with homework. Work the gas station shift, sleep, repeat. Except nothing felt quite normal anymore. Daniel found himself looking over his shoulder more often, checking the locks twice before bed, wondering if the man who'd put Victoria in that trunk was still out there somewhere, and if he knew Daniel's face. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Mrs. Rodriguez handed it to him when he picked up Mia. "This came for you today," she said, eyeing the thick cream-colored envelope with obvious curiosity. "Looks important." It was important. The return address read Ashford Technologies in embossed letters that probably cost more than his weekly grocery budget. Inside was a letter on heavy paper that felt expensive just to touch. And a check. A check for $50,000. Daniel stared at it so long the numbers started to blur. $50,000. He made about $32,000 a year between both jobs. This single piece of paper represented more than a year and a half of his life. "Daddy? What's wrong?" Mia tugged at his sleeve. "You look weird." "Nothing, sweetheart." "I'm fine." He folded the letter quickly, his hands shaking. "Go get your backpack. Time to go home." That night after Mia was asleep, Daniel read the letter again and again. It was from Victoria, thanking him for saving her life and offering this money as a token of appreciation. The letter also included an invitation to visit Ashford Technologies headquarters at his earliest convenience. Daniel spent the next 3 days agonizing over what to do. His first instinct was to send the check back. He wasn't a hero. He'd just done what any decent person would do. Taking money for it felt wrong, like he was cashing in on someone else's trauma. But then he looked at the stack of bills on his kitchen counter. The overdue notice for Mia's asthma medication. The letter from her school about a special program for gifted students that cost $2,000 he didn't have. The quote from the mechanic for the repairs his car desperately needed. $50,000 would change everything. Still, something held him back. Pride, maybe? Or fear that accepting this money would mean he owed Victoria something. Nothing in life was free, his father used to say. Someone always pays. In the end, it was Mia who decided for him. She had an asthma attack on Friday night, worse than usual. Daniel held her while she used her inhaler, counting her breaths, watching her struggle. The inhaler was nearly empty. He had 3 days until payday and $17 in his checking account. On Monday morning, he called the number on the letter and made an appointment. Ashford Technologies was located in a gleaming tower downtown, the kind of building Daniel usually only saw from the highway. He'd had to take a personal day from the warehouse, losing money he couldn't afford to lose, but this couldn't wait. Security in the lobby was tighter than the airport. He had to show ID, get a visitor's badge, and walk through a metal detector. A woman in a crisp suit escorted him to an elevator that required a key card to operate. "Ms. Ashford is looking forward to seeing you," the woman said with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The elevator opened onto the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the entire city. The furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. Daniel suddenly felt very aware of his Walmart jeans, and the fact that his nicest shirt had a small stain near the collar that he'd tried and failed to remove. Victoria appeared from an office at the end of the hall. She looked completely different from the terrified woman he'd pulled from that trunk. Her hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. She wore a navy suit that probably cost more than his car, but her smile when she saw him seemed genuine. "Daniel," she said, walking toward him with her hand extended. "Thank you so much for coming." Her handshake was firm, confident. This was a woman who ran board meetings and made million-dollar decisions before breakfast. "I appreciate the check," Daniel said awkwardly. "But I'm not sure I can accept it." Victoria's smile didn't falter. "Please come into my office. Let's talk." Her office was enormous. A desk that looked like it was carved from a single piece of wood. Leather chairs that probably cost more than his monthly rent. Art on the walls that Daniel suspected was original and not prints from Target. "Sit, please," Victoria said, gesturing to one of the chairs. She sat across from him, not behind her desk. Making it less formal, Daniel realized. Putting them on equal footing, or at least trying to. "The money isn't charity," Victoria said before he could speak. "You saved my life, Daniel. Do you understand what that means? I just heard someone in trouble and most people wouldn't have stopped. Most people would have called the police from a safe distance or just kept driving. You broke into my car. You took a risk." Victoria leaned forward. "The man who put me in that trunk was my business partner. Someone I trusted completely. He was trying to force me to sign over my company shares. If you hadn't found me when you did, I'd be dead. My company would be in his hands. Hundreds of employees would lose their jobs." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "I'm glad I could help." "But $50,000 is not enough," Victoria interrupted. "I know, but I also know you're too proud to accept more. So consider it a start." She paused. "I also wanted to offer you a job." Daniel blinked. "A job? I need a new driver. Someone I can trust. Someone who's proven they'll do the right thing even when it's difficult." Victoria's expression was serious. "The salary would be $90,000 a year plus benefits. Health insurance, dental, retirement matching. Your daughter would be covered too. $90,000. Daniel's mind reeled. That was nearly 3 times what he made now. With benefits. Real health insurance that would cover Mia's medications without him having to choose between rent and her inhaler. Why? The word came out harsher than he intended. "You don't know me. I could be anyone." "You saved my life," Victoria said simply. "That tells me everything I need to know about your character." "And what if I say no?" Something flickered across Victoria's face. "Disappointment? Concern? Then you take the check and I wish you well. But Daniel, I'm not offering this out of guilt or obligation. I need someone I can trust. After what happened, trust is hard to come by. It was too much. Too fast. 2 weeks ago he was nobody. Just another tired single dad working 2 jobs to get by. Now a billionaire CEO was offering him a life-changing amount of money and a job that would solve all his problems. Nothing in life was free. Someone always pays. "I need to think about it," Daniel said, standing up. The chair was so comfortable he almost didn't want to leave it. "This is a lot." Victoria stood as well. She pulled a business card from her jacket pocket. "Take all the time you need." "But Daniel?" "Keep the check. You earned it. What you do with the job offer is up to you." Daniel took the card. His fingers brushed against hers, and for just a moment he saw vulnerability in her eyes. Fear, even. This powerful woman who ran a billion-dollar company was scared. Still looking over her shoulder, just like he'd been doing. "Did they catch him?" Daniel asked. "The man who did this to you?" Victoria's expression hardened. "Not yet. He had too many connections, too many places to hide. But we will. My lawyers are working on it. As Daniel rode the elevator back down, his mind was spinning. $90,000 a year. Health insurance for Mia. A chance to give her the life she deserved. All he had to do was drive a car and accept help from someone he'd helped. So why did it feel like he was missing something? Why did Victoria's expression when she said his last name keep nagging at him? Chen. Daniel. Chen. The way she'd looked at him when he'd said it, like the name meant something to her. He pushed the thought away. He was being paranoid. The stress of that night of everything was making him see connections that didn't exist. But as Daniel walked out of that gleaming tower and back to his beat-up Honda with the check engine light still glowing, he couldn't shake the feeling that accepting Victoria's offer would mean stepping into something much bigger than just a new job. He just had no idea how right he was. Daniel decided to cash the check. He told himself it was the practical choice. Mia needed her medication. His car needed repairs. The overdue bills weren't going to pay themselves. But deep down he knew there was another reason. Curiosity. He'd declined Victoria's job offer, at least for now. Taking $50,000 already felt like accepting too much. But a job, a permanent connection to her world, felt like stepping through a door he couldn't walk back through. Still, he couldn't stop thinking about her. About that moment when he'd said his name and something had changed in her eyes. The first strange thing happened 3 days after he deposited the check. Daniel was at the playground with Mia, watching her climb on the monkey bars and trying not to be the overprotective parent who hovered. A man in a dark suit stood near the park entrance watching. When Daniel looked directly at him, the man pulled out his phone and pretended to take a call. The second time was at the grocery store. A woman with short hair and sunglasses seemed to be in every aisle he visited. When he doubled back to test his theory, she was suddenly very interested in the breakfast cereals. Daniel wasn't paranoid. He'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to know who belonged and who didn't. These people were following him. On the 5th day, Mia came home from school with a story that made his blood run cold. "There was a nice lady at the playground today," Mia said while eating her after-school snack. "She said she knew you." Daniel's hand froze halfway to putting away the milk. "What lady, sweetheart?" "I don't know her name. She had pretty hair. She asked me questions about school and stuff." Mia shrugged like this was no big deal. "She gave me a candy bar, but I didn't eat it because stranger danger." Daniel's heart hammered in his chest. "That's right, baby. You did good."
What kind of questions did she ask?
"Just stuff. Like where you work and if we have any other family." Mia looked up at him, sensing his tension. "Did I do something wrong?" No. "You did everything right." Daniel pulled out his phone. His hands were shaking. "Go watch TV for a bit, okay?" He called the number on Victoria's business card. She answered on the second ring. "Daniel, is everything okay?" "No," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "Someone approached my daughter, and I've had people following me. What the hell is going on?" There was a long pause. "I need you to come to my office. Right now. I'll send a car. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me." "Daniel, please." Victoria's voice was tight. "I can explain everything, but not over the phone. And those people following you, they're mine. They're protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" "From the same people who tried to kill me. Please, let me send the car." 20 minutes later, a black sedan pulled up outside his apartment. Daniel had called Mrs. Rodriguez to watch Mia, making up some excuse about a work emergency. The driver said nothing during the entire trip downtown. This time, Victoria met him in the lobby herself. She looked tired, Daniel noticed. Dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I should have told you sooner. But I thought if I kept it quiet, you'd be safer." "Told me what?" Daniel followed her into the elevator. "What's going on?" Victoria waited until they were in her office with the door closed. She pulled out a folder from her desk drawer and set it on the table between them. "The man who kidnapped me, his name is Gregory Walsh. He was my business partner for 7 years. I trusted him completely." Victoria's jaw tightened. "He's still out there, and he knows you're the one who saved me. So what? I'm just some random guy who happened to be there." "That's what I thought too, until I started looking into your background." Victoria opened the folder. Inside were documents, photos, things that made no sense to Daniel at first. "I don't understand. Why would you investigate me?" Because when you told me your name, something clicked. Chen. Daniel Chen. Victoria pulled out an old photograph. I had to know if it was just a coincidence. The photograph showed two men, younger, standing in front of what looked like a garage. One of them Daniel recognized immediately, even though he'd only been 5 years old when his father died. The other man was older, distinguished looking. "That's my father," Daniel said softly, pointing to the younger man in the photo. "Where did you get this?" "From my father's personal files." Victoria pulled out another photo. The older man, the one standing next to Daniel's father, was clearly a younger version of Victoria's own features. "Your father and mine were best friends, more than that. They founded Ashford Technologies together." Daniel stared at her. "That's impossible. My father was a janitor. He worked night shifts cleaning offices. He died when I was 5. There was barely enough money for the funeral." "That's what you were told." Victoria pulled out more documents, business papers, partnership agreements. "Your father, David Chen, invested his life savings into my father's idea. $20,000 in 1995. It was everything he had. They were going to build the company together." The room felt like it was tilting. Daniel gripped the edge of the table. "If that's true, why did we have nothing? Why did my mom work 3 jobs just to keep us fed?" "Because your father died before the company took off. He got sick. Cancer. He didn't have insurance. By the time they diagnosed it, it was too late." Victoria's voice was gentle. "He spent everything on treatments. When he died, there was nothing left. And because the partnership was never formally registered, legally, your father's contribution disappeared. So my father helped build a billion-dollar company and died broke." Daniel's voice was bitter. "And your family just kept all the money?" "No." Victoria stood up, her hands clasped in front of her. "My father tried to find your family. He wanted to make things right. But your mother had moved, changed her name. She didn't want to be found." Daniel remembered that. His mother taking back her maiden name, moving them across the state. She'd said it was for a fresh start, away from the memories. "My father never stopped looking," Victoria continued. "And when he died 5 years ago, he left instructions. If I ever found David Chen's family, I was supposed to make things right. But there was a condition." "What condition?" Victoria pulled out one more document. A letter, handwritten, yellowed with age. He said that David made him promise something. That if David's son grew up to be a good man, someone who helped others, only then should he receive what was rightfully his. My father was supposed to judge your character before revealing the truth." Daniel's hands were shaking as he took the letter. It was from Victoria's father to Victoria, written shortly before he died. The words were clear. "Wait. Watch. Make sure David's son is worthy of the responsibility." "That's why you had me investigated," Daniel said slowly. "You weren't checking if I was dangerous, you were checking if I was worthy." "I never got the chance to find you," Victoria said. "I'd been searching for 3 years with no luck. And then you saved my life. You, Daniel Chen, son of David Chen. Out of everyone in this city, you were the one who stopped to help." She smiled sadly. "My father would have said it was fate." Daniel's mind was reeling. Everything he'd believed about his life, about his father, was a lie. Not a malicious lie, but a lie nonetheless. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because Gregory Walsh knows who you are." Victoria's expression hardened. "He has access to my father's old files. He knows about your father's contribution, and he's filing legal claims, trying to prove that, as David Chen's son, you have no legitimate claim to anything." "Claim to what?" Victoria pulled out one final document, a trust fund statement. Daniel's eyes went to the bottom number and his vision blurred. $47 million. "That's not real," he whispered. "That can't be real." "It's real. My father set aside company shares in your name." "Well, in David Chen's heir's name. They've been growing in value for 30 years. Victoria sat down heavily. "But there's a problem. Gregory isn't working alone. Your father had a brother. Uncle Raymond." Daniel hadn't thought about him in years. Raymond had shown up at the funeral, drunk, and his mother had told him to leave. What about him? He somehow found out about the inheritance. He's claiming that as your father's only surviving sibling, he deserves the money. And he's joined forces with Gregory. They're both trying to take what's yours. Daniel stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't want it. What? I don't want any of it. The money, the inheritance, whatever. Daniel's voice rose. Look what it's already done. People following me. Strangers approaching my daughter. You nearly died because of this company. I just want my normal life back. Daniel, your father wanted you to have this. My father wanted me to struggle for 30 years? My mom working herself to death while billions of dollars sat in some account? Daniel's anger surprised even himself. No, I don't believe that. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. You're right to be angry, but running from this won't make it go away. Raymond and Gregory know you exist now. They'll come after you whether you accept the inheritance or not. The only way to protect yourself and Mia is to fight. I'm not a fighter. I'm a warehouse worker. You're David Chen's son, Victoria said firmly. And whether you accept it or not, you have more power than you think. Daniel looked at the documents spread across the table, his father's face in those old photographs. The trust fund statement with its impossible number. The letter from a man he'd never met, making decisions about his life before he was even born. I need time, he said finally. Time is something we don't have much of. Victoria walked to the window, looking out over the city. But I understand. Just promise me you'll think about it. And please let my security team continue protecting you. It's not charity, it's necessity. Daniel nodded numbly. As he left. Her office? His mind couldn't settle on any single thought. Everything was too big, too overwhelming. His father hadn't been just a janitor. He'd been a founder, a pioneer, and Daniel had spent his entire life not knowing. The question was, what was he going to do about it now? Daniel didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling while his mind ran in circles. $47 million. His father, a founder, Uncle Raymond, who he hadn't seen in over 20 years, suddenly claiming rights to money he'd done nothing to earn. The next morning, he called in sick to both jobs. For the first time in 3 years, Daniel Chen did something just for himself. He drove to the cemetery where his father was buried. The headstone was simple. David Chen, beloved husband and father. The grass around it was overgrown. Daniel felt a pang of guilt. He visited maybe twice a year, always in a rush, always feeling like he should be somewhere else. I don't know what to do, Dad, Daniel said aloud, not caring if anyone heard him talking to a grave. Everyone says you wanted me to have this money, but what am I supposed to do with it? I don't know how to be rich. I barely know how to keep the lights on. The wind rustled through the trees. A bird sang somewhere nearby. No divine answers came. And Uncle Raymond. Daniel's jaw clenched. I remember what Mom said about him, that he'd gamble away his own shadow if someone would bet on it. Now he's trying to take what you built? Daniel stayed there for an hour, talking to his father's grave like they were having the conversation they'd never gotten to have. Eventually, he stood up, brushed the grass off his knees, and made a decision. He called Victoria. I'll fight, Daniel said when she answered. But I need your help. 3 days later, Daniel sat in a conference room surrounded by lawyers that cost more per hour than he made in a week. Victoria sat beside him, her own legal team flanking the other side of the table. They'd been explaining the situation for the past 45 minutes, and Daniel's head was spinning. Let me make sure I understand. Daniel interrupted the lawyer who'd been talking about precedent and probate law. Raymond is claiming that because my dad died without a will specifically naming me, and because the partnership with Victoria's father was never formalized in writing, he has a claim to my father's investment? Essentially, yes, the lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia, confirmed. It's a weak argument legally, but combined with Gregory Walsh's claims that the entire original partnership was fraudulent, they're creating enough doubt to tie this up in court for years. And in the meantime, the trust remains frozen. You can't access the funds and neither can they, but the legal fees will pile up. They're betting you'll give up or settle. Victoria leaned forward. They don't know you very well. Daniel managed a weak smile. I'm not sure I know me very well anymore. There's something else, Patricia said, pulling out another document. We've been investigating Raymond Chen's finances. He's in debt, serious debt. Over $500,000 to various casinos and private lenders. Some of those lenders have connections to organized crime. Daniel's stomach dropped. So he's desperate. Very, which makes him dangerous. Patricia X. Changed a look with Victoria. We also found evidence that Raymond was contacted by Gregory Walsh. They've been in communication for at least 3 months. 3 months? Daniel frowned. But I only met Victoria 2 weeks ago. Exactly, Victoria said grimly. Which means they knew about you before I did. Gregory must have found the information in my father's files before he tried to kidnap me. This has been planned for a while. Daniel stood up, pacing to the window. Below, the city sprawled in every direction. Millions of people living their lives, none of them dealing with anything like this. What if I just give Raymond half? Split it? Would that end this? No, Patricia said firmly. Because Gregory wouldn't get his cut. He's convinced Raymond that together they can get everything. They're not interested in compromise. So what's our move? Patricia smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. We go on the offensive. I've filed motions to examine Raymond's debts and his connections to Walsh. We're arguing that this is a conspiracy to defraud the estate. And we have evidence. What evidence? Victoria pulled out her phone and played a recording. Daniel recognized Uncle Raymond's voice immediately. Rougher than he remembered, but unmistakable. All you gotta do is keep him scared, Raymond was saying. Make him think he's in over his head. He'll cave. Kid's got no spine, just like his old man. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He barely heard the rest of the recording. Something about splitting the money 70-30 once they had it. Where did you get that? Daniel asked. Raymond isn't as smart as he thinks he is. He makes phone calls on an unsecured line. We've been listening. Victoria's expression was ice cold. He also said some other things. About your father. About how David was weak for investing in some stupid tech idea instead of real opportunities. Real opportunities meaning gambling, Daniel said bitterly. Your uncle blames your father for not lending him money when he needed it. He's been carrying that resentment for 30 years. Victoria paused. He also said he was glad when David died, that it served him right for being a fool. Daniel's vision went red. He'd never considered himself a violent person, but in that moment, he wanted to find Raymond and make him take back every word. Use it, Daniel said to Patricia. Use all of it. I want him to get nothing. The next few weeks were brutal. Raymond's lawyers filed counter motions. Gregory Walsh's team tried to get the case dismissed. Daniel had to take time off work, burning through his limited savings even though Victoria kept offering to cover his expenses. The breaking point came when Daniel got a call from Mia's school. Mr. Chen, there was an incident today, the principal said. A man came to pick up Mia claiming to be her grandfather. Daniel's blood went cold. What happened? Don't worry, we followed protocol. We didn't release her to him. But he was quite insistent. He said you'd given him permission. I gave no such permission. What did this man look like? The description matched Raymond. Daniel left work immediately and drove to the school, his heart hammering. Mia was waiting in the office, confused but safe. Daniel hugged her so tight she squeaked in protest. Daddy, you're squishing me. Sorry, baby. Sorry. He pulled back, checking her over like he could somehow see if she'd been traumatized. Are you okay? I'm fine. The man said he was grandpa, but I never met any grandpas, so I told the teacher. Mia looked proud of herself. Stranger danger, right? Right, you did so good, sweetheart. That night, after Mia was asleep, Daniel called Victoria. This ends now. I don't care what it takes. I want them stopped. I've been thinking the same thing. Victoria's voice was tight. I hired a private investigator. He found something interesting. What? Raymond isn't just working with Gregory. He's the one who helped Gregory find me. He gave him information about my schedule, my security protocols, everything. Victoria paused. Daniel, your uncle helped plan my kidnapping. The room spun. Are you sure? Bank records don't lie. Raymond received a payment of $50,000 2 days before I was taken. It came from a shell corporation Gregory controls. Daniel sat down heavily. His uncle hadn't just betrayed him. He'd been willing to commit murder for money. The police? Daniel managed, already notified. They're building a case. With the evidence we have, Raymond and Gregory are both looking at serious prison time. Victoria's voice softened. I'm sorry, Daniel. I know he's family. He stopped being family the moment he tried to hurt a child, Daniel said. Mine or anyone else's. The case moved quickly after that. With evidence of conspiracy and attempted murder, Raymond was arrested. Gregory Walsh, who'd been hiding in Mexico, was extradited. Both men faced charges that would put them away for decades. The legal battle over the inheritance became almost secondary. With Raymond facing criminal charges, his civil claim fell apart. Victoria's lawyers made short work of the remaining objections. 6 months after Daniel had pulled Victoria from that trunk, he sat in a lawyer's office signing papers that made him the legal owner of a trust fund worth $47 million. Congratulations, Patricia said, shaking his hand. Your father would be proud. Daniel looked at the papers. His father's name was there in old typewritten letters. David Chen, co-founder. Finally recognized. Finally real. What happens now? Daniel asked Victoria, who'd insisted on being there for the final signing. Now? Victoria smiled. Now you decide what kind of man you want to be. You have the resources to do anything. So what are you going to do? Daniel thought about his father, working night shifts to invest in a dream. His mother, working 3 jobs to keep them fed. All the other single parents he knew struggling just like he had been. I think, Daniel said slowly, I know exactly what I'm going to do. But that would require one more difficult conversation, one more choice that would define not just his future, but his daughter's. And despite everything, despite the money and the lawyers and the victory, Daniel still wasn't sure he was ready for what came next. The hardest part. He was learning, wasn't fighting for what was his. It was deciding what to do with it once he won. Daniel stood in front of his bathroom mirror at 5 in the morning, just like he had every day for the past 3 years. Except this time he didn't have to go to work. Either work. He'd given notice at both jobs 2 weeks ago, and the reality still hadn't quite sunk in. He was a millionaire, 47 times over. The face staring back at him looked the same. Same tired eyes, same scar on his chin from when he'd fallen off his bike at age 9, same stubble he needed to shave. But everything else had changed. Mia appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. Daddy, why are you up? It's Saturday. Old habits, Daniel said, picking her up even though she was getting too big for it. Want to make pancakes? Over breakfast, Mia chattered about her friends at school, about the sleepover she wanted to have, about the science project due next month. Normal kid stuff. Daniel realized that was what he wanted most. For Mia to have a normal childhood, despite the money, despite everything that had happened. Daddy. Mia looked at him with syrup on her chin. Are we rich now? Daniel had been dreading this question. Kind of, yeah. Does that mean I can get a pony? No ponies in the apartment, kiddo. But we could get a house with a yard, right? Mrs. Rodriguez said rich people have big houses. Daniel sighed. Mrs. Rodriguez had been full of opinions since the news broke. Most of the neighborhood had been. Some congratulations, some suspicion, some outright jealousy. It was exhausting. Maybe, Daniel said. But we need to talk about some things first. That afternoon, Daniel met Victoria at a coffee shop. Neutral ground away from her office and its reminders of corporate power. She arrived in jeans and a simple sweater, her hair in a ponytail. Almost normal. You look terrible, Victoria said by way of greeting. Haven't been sleeping much. Buyer's remorse? She ordered a coffee and they found a quiet table in the corner. More like existential crisis. Daniel wrapped his hands around his own cup. I keep thinking about my mom. She died 4 years ago, worked herself to death trying to provide for me. If she'd known about this money, about my dad's partnership, everything would have been different. Your mother made her choice, Victoria said gently. She could have fought for recognition. She chose not to, because she was scared, because she was alone, because the system is rigged against people like her. Daniel's voice rose slightly and he forced himself to calm down. Sorry, it's just been eating at me. Don't apologize. You're right. The system is rigged? Victoria leaned back. So what are you going to do about it? That was the question, wasn't it? Daniel pulled out a folder he'd been working on. Inside were plans, ideas, things he'd been thinking about during all those sleepless nights. "I want to start a foundation," Daniel said. "For single parents? Help with childcare costs, medical expenses, education, all the things my mom needed and couldn't get." Victoria's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant. I want to call it the David Chen Foundation. In my dad's name." Daniel spread out the papers. "I've been doing research. There are about 13 million single parents in the country. Most of them are struggling. What if we could help even a fraction of them? How much are you thinking of investing?" Daniel took a deep breath. 10 million to start. Maybe more if it works," Victoria studied him. "That's a quarter of your inheritance. It's a quarter of my dad's investment paying forward. He took a risk on your father's dream. I want to take a risk on other people's dreams. Your uncle would say you're being foolish. My uncle is in prison for attempted murder. I'm not taking life advice from him." Daniel managed to smile. "Look, I know I should be smart about this. Invest it, let it grow, live off the interest like you probably do. But every time I think about just sitting on this money while kids like Mia don't have enough to eat, I feel sick." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. "Patricia, it's Victoria. I need you to draw up paperwork for a charitable foundation. Daniel Chen is the founder. I'll send over the details." She hung up and looked at Daniel. "You're going to need help. Legal structure, administration, grant applications. It's complicated. I don't know anything about running a foundation, so learn. I'll help. Consider it my way of honoring your father's memory too." Victoria smiled. "He helped build my family's fortune. It's only fair we help you build his legacy." The next few months were a whirlwind. Daniel moved out of his apartment into a modest house with a yard for Mia. Not a mansion, not something ostentatious. Just enough space to breathe. He hired a financial advisor who helped him invest most of the remaining money wisely. And he threw himself into building the foundation. It was harder than he'd expected. There were regulations, paperwork, board meetings. Daniel had to learn a completely new language of nonprofits and tax codes and grant making. But slowly, piece by piece, it came together. The David Chen Foundation officially launched 8 months after Daniel signed those inheritance papers. The first round of grants went to 50 single parents in the city. Childcare assistance, medical bill relief, scholarship money for kids who wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it. Daniel insisted on reading every application himself. He wanted to know their stories, to see himself and his mother in their struggles. One application came from a woman named Rita, single mother of 2, working as a nurse's aide. She needed money to fix her car so she could get to work. $500 that might as well have been $5 million for someone living paycheck to paycheck. Daniel approved the grant personally and delivered the check himself. Rita cried when he handed it to her. "You don't understand," she kept saying. This changes everything. Daniel did understand. Better than she knew. The foundation grew. Word spread. More applications came in. Daniel hired staff, real professionals who knew how to scale the operation. Within a year, they were helping 200 families. By year 2, it was 500. Victoria kept her promise to help. She joined the foundation board and contributed her own money. Other wealthy donors followed her lead. The David Chen Foundation became known not just locally but nationally. Daniel found himself speaking at conferences, talking to journalists, appearing on podcasts. It was surreal. He was the same guy who'd been stocking shelves and manning gas station registers. Now people wanted his opinion on wealth inequality and social mobility. "You're becoming famous," Mia said one day, showing him a news article on her tablet. She was 10 now, growing up so fast it scared him. "Not famous, just visible." Daniel ruffled her hair. "There's a difference. Will I have to start a foundation when I grow up?" "You can do whatever you want, sweetheart." That's the point, but Mia surprised him. At her school's career day, she told her class she wanted to help people like her dad did. Daniel, sitting in the back of the classroom, had to wipe his eyes. 3 years after that night in the industrial district, Daniel stood on a stage at a gala fundraiser. 500 people in evening wear, each paying $1,000 a plate to support the foundation. The event would raise over $2 million. Victoria sat at the head table looking proud. Patricia was there too, having become a friend over the years. Even Mrs. Rodriguez had been invited, wearing a dress she'd bought specially for the occasion. Daniel approached the microphone. Public speaking still terrified him, but he'd gotten better at it. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began. 3 years ago, I was working 2 jobs and barely making ends meet. I was tired all the time. I worried constantly about money, about my daughter's future, about whether I was failing as a parent. The audience was silent, listening. Then I learned that my father, who I'd always been told was just a janitor, had actually helped build one of the most successful tech companies in the world. He'd taken everything he had and bet it on a dream. Not for himself, but for his family. "For me," Daniel's voice caught. He paused, composing himself. "My father died before he could see his dream pay off. But his partner, Richard Ashford, never forgot him. And when the time was right, Richard's daughter Victoria made sure my father's legacy lived on." He gestured to Victoria, who raised her glass in acknowledgement. "I could have taken that money and disappeared, lived a comfortable life, never worked another day. And nobody would have blamed me. I'd earned it, right? It was mine." Daniel looked out at the crowd. "But I kept thinking about my mom, about all the single parents I knew who were struggling, just like she had, and I realized that money isn't really mine. It's borrowed, from my father's sacrifice, from Richard Ashford's integrity, from every person who believed that tomorrow could be better than today." He pulled out a photo, old and creased, his father as a young man smiling at the camera. "This foundation isn't about me. It's about what my father believed. That if you help people when they need it most, they'll pay it forward. That investing in dreams, even small ones, can change the world." The applause started small, then grew. People stood. Daniel saw tears in some eyes. Victoria was beaming. After the speeches and the dinner and the networking, Daniel found himself alone on the venue's balcony. The city spread out below, millions of lights in the darkness. Each one a person, a story, a struggle. Victoria joined him, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Your father would be proud," she said, handing him a glass. "You think?" "I know. My father wrote about him in his journals, about how David always said that success meant nothing if you didn't lift others up with you." Victoria clinked her glass against his. "You're living his philosophy. I'm just trying not to screw it up. You're doing more than that. You're giving people hope. That matters more than you know." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city. "Do you ever regret it?" Victoria asked. "Giving away so much? You could have kept it all." Daniel thought about his modest house, his reliable car, Mia's college fund secured, the knowledge that he'd never have to work 2 jobs again, never have to choose between rent and medication. "No," he said honestly. "The money I kept is enough, more than enough. But the money I gave away, that's actually changing lives. That's real wealth." His phone buzzed. A message from the foundation director. Another 100 applications had come in this week. More people needing help, more stories, more chances to make a difference. "I should get home," Daniel said. "Mia has a soccer game in the morning." "Still coaching?" "Of course. Some things don't change just because your bank account does." Victoria laughed. "You're a good man, Daniel Chen. Your father knew what he was doing, investing in the future. He just didn't know his real investment was you." Daniel drove home through the quiet streets, past the old industrial district where everything had changed. The abandoned warehouses were still there, dark and silent. But they didn't scare him anymore. At home, Mia was asleep. Daniel checked on her like he did every night, pulling her blanket up and moving the stuffed animals she'd kicked to the floor. She looked peaceful, safe, loved. That was the real legacy, Daniel thought. Not the money, not the foundation, not even the lives they'd helped. It was this. The chance to give his daughter the childhood he'd never had. The security to dream without fear. His father had given him that chance. And Daniel was making sure other parents could give their children the same. In the kitchen, Daniel found a letter he'd been writing. To his father, even though the man had been dead for almost 30 years. He picked up his pen and added one final line. "I understand now, Dad, it was never about the money. It was about the choice. Thank you for giving me the freedom to choose right." Daniel sealed the letter and put it in a box with all the others he'd written over the years. Someday maybe he'd leave them for Mia, so she'd know her grandfather's story, so she'd understand where she came from. But for now, it was enough to live it. To honor that legacy not with words but with action. Daniel turned off the lights and went to bed. Tomorrow, there would be more applications to review. more families to help, more dreams to invest in. His father had bet everything on tomorrow being better than today. Daniel Chen was determined to prove him right.